Hey folks, what is going on? Welcome to yet another RTcmix tutorial. In this video, we'll be focusing on how to implement lists to create a drum machine, or more generally, a step sequencer. So what we need to do first is select different samples from our computer that we want to use for our drum machine, and we're going to list them as path names, just like I showed you in the previous tutorial. So I already have mine here, and I'm going to copy them in here. But just in case you do not have any samples that would work for this, I have left a link in the description of the video where you can download a free sample library, and actually these samples come from this one, so feel free to use them to follow along. And the next thing we need to do is be able to retrieve any of these path names from this list. So what we're going to do is type sf index, let's say 0, and sf equals sf list, and open brackets sf index. And so just to remind you, this syntax allows us to reference list elements from a specific list. And so the syntax is the list name and the index of the element starting from 0. So since the sf index variable is equals to 0, we would be taking the 0th element from this sf list, which is this one, and so we would be referencing this one. And if I were to print sf, and let me comment out this thing, if I were to print this, we would be able to read the first path name in the list. So you can see that it's the same one. And similarly, if I change this to 3, let's say, we should get the 4th one, so perk01. And if I save this and run it, we would get that one exactly. So now what we are going to do is, instead of printing this, we're going to pass the sf variable to RT input, and we are going to be able to play whatever sound file we want from this list, depending on the index. So if I do index 0, I should be able to play the first sound file, and depending on what I write for sf index, it will change, right? Now you might already see where I'm going with this. So what I'm going to do is include all this stuff except for the start and end skip time inside a loop. I'm going to copy this in here, going to indent this, and I'm going to do a loop with the variable I equals 0, I less than, let's say, 10, because we have 10 elements in the list, and let's say I plus equals 1, open curly braces, and close the loop with a curly braces. And I am going to say that the sf index will be I, and before I finish, this is very important, we're going to say start plus equals and a random value, let's say 0.15. And before we play it, let's go over what this is supposed to do. And I'm actually going to change this to random, just because it's going to be better. So we have a this loop, which is using this variable I as the counter variable, and this will increase by 1 each time it iterates, and until it reaches 10, which is the number of elements we have in the list, and that variable I will be the sound file index. And so we're going to go through each of these sound files every time the loop repeats, and we're going to use a stereo to play those sound files. So now let's see what this sounds like. Great. So of course there are many ways in which we can improve this script. So let's start with very simple things. So one thing is we can use a variable called sf list size, and we don't have to count how many elements we have in this list. What we can do is say sf list size, and we can use a function called len, which will calculate the length of any list we give it as an argument. So let's say list sf list, and this will represent the number 10 because this list has 10 elements. And another thing we can do is, let's say we wanted to repeat this same order of sound files more than one. So if I were to say this times 4, what would happen is this. And so what is happening here is, one, the variable is going past 9. The I variable is going past 9, which is the last index of the last element of our list. And two, whenever RTcmix is asked to retrieve an element with an index that is greater than the last one, it will keep returning that same element. And so to solve this, we can wrap the I variable with the modulo operator with the size of the list, so sf list size. And so this is going to make sure that the sf index variable will be always a value between 0 and this value minus 1. And so let's see what happens. Yeah, so problem solved. And the last thing we need to figure out how to do is how to specify a different sequence of sound files without manually reordering these that we have in the list. And so one way we can do this is by creating another array or list called sequence. Let's call it sequence, and we're going to type a random random order of index values. So let's say something like this, and we're going to create another variable called sequence size and use the len function to figure out what the size of that sequence is. And then we're going to replace this by the sequence size, and inside the loop we are going to type sequence index, which would be equal to I modulo sequence size. Then what this is going to be is we're going to say sequence and sequence index, not in all caps, index. And what this is going to do is make sure that this sequence index will be always go through each of these elements. And then we're going to retrieve these elements to apply it as the index of this list. And so we're going to go over this order over and over again and play those sound files. So if we play this, great. Now you don't have to do this, but let's say I wanted to try different possibilities every time I run the script, and I can let RTcmix choose a different sequence for me. So what I would do is make another for loop that will randomly populate elements inside the sequence. So I can get rid of this, and I could do something like for n equals 0 and less than, and this will be the amount of the sequence size I want. So I can do something like this, get rid of this one. Let's say I want a sequence that is has 10 elements, sequence size, and then I can say that n plus equals 1. And then what I would have is the nth element of sequence will be a random number between 0 and the sf list size minus 1. And let's run it now. Sf list size is not declared. Let's see. Oh, I have to move this stuff up. That's right. Yeah, and if I run this again, And again, I get a different one. So this seems like a good place to stop. I encourage you to try different possibilities like changing the speed of the loop or randomizing the amplitudes. So I could say irand 0.51 and let's say 0.125. And we can also change the sample. So I can go to another list of files that I have here. Whoa, not that one. Let's copy this one, and replace it this one, and let me play this one. Run it again. Awesome. So there's a whole world of possibilities with this. You don't even need to use drum samples or percussive samples. You can use outlandish things like samples of screaming babies or penguin sounds or whatever you want. But in any case, I hope you enjoy playing with this, and leave any questions or comments if you have any. And I'll see you all in the next tutorial, and thanks for watching.